Oh, good. Susan just joined. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending our, actually, I think this is our first in-person meeting of this group from either phase 1 or now our current phase 2 project looking at implementation of parking management in both Groton and Stonington. I apologize, had COVID last week, so I'm talking through a mask, but I'll try to be as clear as possible. I think before we get started, maybe we just do a quick around the room and those on the camera so everybody knows what he is. We'll go from there.
Jones, Assistant Director, Groton Planning and Development.
Public Works, Groton.
H. Rock, Economic and Community Development, out of Groton.
Pritchard, Planning and Zoning Commission, Town of Groton. Public Forest, EDC, Town of Groton.
Susan Fisher, Director of the Mystic Museum of Art.
Danielle, she's first selectman.
John Burke, Parking and Trans, oh, sorry.
Well,
John Burke, Parking and Transportation Consultant.
John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development. Then we have 3 people online. John, you want to go first?
Yeah, John Groton, Economic Development Commission for Stonington. And just as an FYI, I have a hard stop at 1:45. Sorry if I leave early.
Thanks. Susan?
Hi. I'm Susan Cullen, the Town of Stonington's Economic and Community Development Director. And it's great to see everybody there. I wish I could have come in person.
Thanks. And then Todd?
Yeah, have you got any video for me?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay, well, anyway, I'm here, Todd Brady, downtown business real estate owner, Mystic.
Okay. All right, well, thanks. So I'll kind of hand it over to John today. And I think the first thing we can talk about is, we'll go through the agenda, proposed on-street metered parking, expansion, parking shuttle, and then talk about our next steps. That's the order of business today. One of the things we keep getting asked from our town council and the public are when are key participation dates? How can people participate? What are the next steps? Some people are still asking, when was all of this decided? And again, the message is nothing has been decided yet. And I think we'll get into all those pieces today. Oh, and Peter Springsteel just jumped in too. Peter, you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Peter Springsteel. I live in the historic district neighborhood of Mystic, and I'm also a local architect doing quite a bit of work downtown.
Thanks. Okay, so with that, with no further ado, I'll hand it over to John.
Okay. Okay, good to see you all in person for a change. I'm happy to be here to talk about where we're at. It seems like we're starting to make progress and get into some of the particulars of the program. And really, I think what we want to accomplish today, more than anything else, not just as John mentioned, the next steps, but confirming what the program parameters are. I typically like to recommend, which we did in the study, so we have results of what was recommended, and then work with a task force or a committee on implementation, which is what we're doing. And hopefully you get consensus. Well, you don't always get consensus of a committee, but I think the closer we get to a discussion, because some of the answers and some of the parameters that we aren't right or wrong, as much as they are decisions in each community is a little bit different. So I don't, oftentimes say, well, what do you think is the right thing? I'll tell you what I think is the right thing, but ultimately what it comes down to is a community decisions and values change. So feel free to opine. We're going to get into each of these things. First thing I wanted to bring up, John, is the Mystic Parking Improvement Implementation Plan. And just to rehash a little bit about the study, and then quickly these 4 program implementation elements. Communities often, there's a lot to do, and you have to figure out what you can bite off and chew and get done in a first phase. And I consider this kind of a first phase discussion. First being charged for on-street parking in the retail district. And I won't rehash all the reasons why we think that's a good idea. We talked about employees in the zones and trying to free up spaces and get kind of good turnover for business and these reduce traffic and all those things. But essentially what we're saying is all of the 2-hour currently posted 2-hour on-street spaces on the Groton and Stonington side of the drawbridge would be metered. Additionally, there were 2 others on the Groton side that we had interest on the Groton side to meter, and these are side streets that would help provide for visitation downtown, Pearl Street and Gravel Street. How do these differ? These differ slightly because they're mainly residential. All those other streets are commercial, could be right into a business. These ones on Pearl and Gravel are residential, but very, very close to the commercial business. And on both of those streets, most of the homes have ample off-street driveways and parking. Not 100%, but pretty much the case, okay? So at least for the sections that we're looking at. And again, Pearl Street, we're not looking all the way to the end. We're only looking to the church. Gravel Street, it's really just the first little 12 spaces right before you get to the bend. So that would be phase 1. Now, it's not to say that couldn't expand in a second phase. So 153 total metered spaces, 87 in Groton and 66 in Stone. Any questions on the on-street element? Okay, for charged parking. The second would be expanding employee and visitor parking areas outside the retail district. So we're talking about displacing employees. Now we want to find places for them. We know the art museum lot can only do so much and they get full. So we need to continue to look for others. Now, we have seen the private sector jump in here since the study concluded, and we have some new spaces available on the private side for public parking. And, you know, 1 Pearl Street comes to mind. So you'll see there is a need. The private sector gets in, there's generally a need. Well, we want to look at other areas. We've looked at 3 in particular, with the Union Baptist Church lot, St. Mark's Episcopal Church lot, and the 4th Voting Hall lot. Shared lot agreements would be the case for Union and St. Mark's, the 4th Voting Hall's municipal lot. So we'd be looking for these to be employee parking locations. It's about 100 off-street parking spaces in each, combined, I mean. On-street parking, there's also a good amount of parking within a 5-minute zone outside of, you know, what we consider the real village center, but they're still within a short walk of downtown. These are spaces that aren't getting used in all of the counts that we did back in 2020. We came back and looked at them again here in 2022, still not getting the use, okay? So here we're talking about striping these spaces. Sometimes we're not sure if people know that they can park on those spaces. Sometimes it identifies it for visitors, the actual parking spaces. So Library Street, High Street to Elm, Borough Street, High Street to Elm, High Street itself. On the Stonington side, East Main Street, Broadway to Lincoln, Lincoln Street, East Main to Washington. Okay, so these are streets that you know, behind CVS, you can see on the Stonington side, they're just not getting, a whole lot of use. They're not used by the residents, so why not strike it? The third element is supporting the Mystic Seaport Museum parking shuttle. And we're talking about different ways that we could do that as a community. That would be marketing, advertising, promotion, dynamic fixed signage, and charging. Charging for on-street parking downtown helps put people into the seats of the buses. Okay, so that I understand, I'm not sure if we have representation here, but I'm understanding there's going to be a second year for that shuttle. I don't know if anybody.
Yeah,
There is.
yeah.
And then finally, support expansion of public use parking in private lots. And as I mentioned, a couple of privates have already jumped in there, Pearl Street, Chelsea, Groton, and the other lots that I've sort of mentioned. Okay.
You know, one thing I want to stress with this list here, so this is what we've been working on is taking the parking study from a couple of years ago, which had a lot of recommendations, had analysis, had a lot of pieces in it, and how do we further refine that? And the work that John and others have been doing, going out on the sites, meeting with people within the district, is all right. these are basically what we're looking to bring forward to our respective approval bodies to then implement these items. Some of this we'll need to take out more publicly, get a little bit more public feedback, but again, none of this is set in stone, but I think a lot of what John's trying to accomplish here today is, you know, as we're going step by step of, all right, any questions that this group has, as everybody here is a stakeholder in one way or another in this district, how do we further refine this so that when we take it out further publicly, people have the right information, right understanding, and they know why we're making these recommendations. Like, for example, the Mystic Seaport shuttle, I think we all know that's not going to work that well if there's no incentive for people to go to the shuttle. If people can still drive around and get free parking without metered parking, then some of these are built upon each other. So, yeah. I don't mean to beat that dead horse, but that question just keeps coming up so often that I feel like we just need.
And to that point, some of these elements are going beyond the initial stage, which is what do we do in phase 2? What keeps coming up is, why don't we build more parking behind the fire department? Why don't we go down toward the Amtrak station and build more parking? Some of these things can be looked at. We talked about the frontier lot. Is that an opportunity to work with the utility to expand parking? These aren't things that are in phase 1, things that you want to consider continuing to expand off-street parking. So maybe start with a discussion about that, Paul.
Paul Starter. And I apologize for being late. I was stuck in traffic. Frontier was putting up cables or something. But certainly I agree that it really has to start with working with the infrastructure we have now, which means enforce what regulations we have and go from there and see how these expand. Certainly no one's going to go park 15-minute walk away when they can continue to circulate and find parking downtown. So from my perspective, living on the corner of Jackson and Washington and seeing what's going on with the parking spaces there right in front of my house, and which is, I don't know, 3-4 minute walk from the bridge, there seems to be some parking spaces there. So apparently there's not, either there's plenty downtown or people are finding them still. And there's certainly no motivation for them not to. So there's, from my perspective, it's anecdotally, there seems to be enough parking spaces downtown right now. I know if going back to why we're doing this is to move those people off of Main Street once in a while, so there's a continual rotation, so our merchants can, I don't know, see more people coming. There seems to be enough parking down there. So I've got friends, neighbors saying, why do anything? Why not just let it roll? So until we force these people, as John said, until you motivate people to move out, they're not going to. But, oh man, I had another thought. I guess that's the main objective is, are we going to enforce regulations? Are we going to put meter people down there to enforce that? Are we going to raise ticket prices for violations, for infractions up to what, I don't know what the state maximum is. Is it $40, $50, $60? What are we going to do? Are we going to really take this seriously? Because just putting in meters isn't going to work. Why is someone not going to sit at that meter until it's expired or 1 or 2 hours beyond? I mean, why not? So I know all of that's part of it, but oh, I remember what I wanted to say too. Has anything been addressed directly with merchants who have employees? Where are they parking? Or are we just going to rely on meters and enforcement to force these employees of some substantial employers down there to go someplace else, or have these employers actually done anything to provide parking someplace downtown? Because that's still that's why I said from day one that the first thing that needs to be addressed is employees. Then you actually know what parking you need. So we don't even know that unless someone has physically gone to these employers and say, how many employees do you have at a time? Where are they parking? Where are they driving? And without that, we don't even know. That's employee parking is still the main cog.
What we do know about employee parking is you have an unusual situation where our counts showed that in the 2-hour zone, you had 1 in 4 people parking beyond the 2, 1 in 7 past 4 hours. I have not seen that in any of my, so, and the enforcement piece aside, which you make a good point, Paul, we know that there's employees in that zone and, you know, the higher the cost of parking that is driven up by the low supply and the high demand, the more the incentive is for someone to take that chance of getting a citation in that space. So first thing we always do in these things is there enough parking? Yes. Are we managing it? No. Is there a better way to manage it? Yes. Pricing is being put upon you whether you want it or not. You're seeing $5 per half hour. I'm seeing sort of rates that we don't typically see on the book. Because the on-street is free. The on-street public parking typically holds down those rates. We've seen that in other communities. Without that, you're going to draw everybody to the center. You're going to welcome more traffic than you already have. That's a decision, but that's what happens. We know 30 to 35% of the parking traffic downtown is circulating cars looking for those spaces. So that's what we're up against. I think you make good points.
I just think it is the plan, and I missed the beginning, or maybe you haven't gotten to that, with costs and revenues and return on investment. I don't want to see a single tax dollar be spent on any of this stuff. It shouldn't have to.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, we haven't. Okay,
We'll get there soon. And then,
thanks. All right.
I think also we can talk more coming up about the employee parking program and some of those pieces of it, because that is something that we see as a key component of this.
I think that one thing, as a relative newcomer to the area, what would help from my perspective is some method of wayfinding, some way of communicating to people as they come into Mystic, where to look for parking. I, like everyone else around the table, get frustrated sitting behind a car that's going 5 miles an hour, watching for the main chance for a parking space to open up. Also, it would alleviate some of the pressure on that downtown lot. I think that people they find the address of their destination and they're not thinking about the location of the parking. So that's my contribution. And as far as the downtown Mystic merchants go, I hear from them all the time. Some of them want their employees to have permits. Some say, oh God, no, I want my customers to have the access. So I think that you will have found, I'm sure, that there is a great diversity of opinion about how close our employees need to park and how much space do we want to reserve for our customers.
Getting back to the good points, Susan, and free parking, the walk distances in downtown where there's free parking are very short. What people consider a reasonable walk distance in surveys, extremely short.
Really,
The higher that rate goes, all of a sudden things become reasonable. Walk distance increase, planning improves for your community. So
A quick comment about the Seaport Museum parking shuttle. It's also the water shuttle, right? I know they stopped that early in the season, but
The dock space. That's the big problem in downtown. So the Seaport's having to run the shuttle. They have one at their stop. They can't find a place in downtown Mystic to drop them. So they've approached people and been told no, or still haven't gotten back to them. They need to stop before the bridge.
they moved for a few weeks early this summer.
And so, they will have the water.
But it's not only the land shuttle, but in long-term promoting water shuttle as well to help with the parking spaces. So I would imagine if we solve that problem and you told people, if you park here, you can get on a boat. I think that would be quite attractive.
yeah, I think with this first thing, we just want to make sure if there's anything objectionable on here, we should, as a task force or a committee, say, look, that makes no sense. Let's not do it. But I wanted to start with that just to make sure we're talking apples to apples.
Either parking or Main Street. Is that at times taking away any sidewalk area is gonna be difficult. Those sidewalks can get packed on a busy weekend. I don't know what you were talking about, the ticket kiosk or individual parking units. But to have the space for that may not be realistic. The other concern is traffic. Every time somebody parks in one of those places, it backs up traffic because they don't know how to parallel. And just the time you're going to play through. The bump out situations that we have, it makes it difficult, and it really does back up. That's a penalty. You pay.
Great point. I just came
And
from,
maybe such that it's not worth, wow, who cares whether they're parking right next to the store or not? It may not make any difference to the merchant.
coming from Rockland, Maine, I'm doing a project there, and Route 1 goes through all of these communities, all the way up to northern Maine. And so the same thing, they're looking at it a little differently. They have a little more width, but not much. And so from their perspective, outside dining, curb space for Uber Lyft, curb space demand for bikes, any of that is good because they want to improve traffic flow. They want-
The comment for where parking's available is probably very important. Maybe it should be put on a website for the domestic, to show areas that you know before you get there where to go, because they're sort of scattered around, not just one spot.
Yeah, we'll get into that in the implementation as well. I think, and back to dynamic signing too, most communities I'm dealing with, they're looking for dynamic signs. When the museum lot fills, we have a sign up that says where to go, electronically. That's something we can put on your operator of your parking system once we get to that point. For instance, if we go into, take the shuttle, we could send them in there, don't go downtown, it's full for that lot, or if we have additional lots, which we don't have additional public lots, unique to this thing. But if we did through these shared lot agreements, like what voting hall we have it on the way in Broadway, you're going to see it. Yeah, you can bring people in. So I think that's kind of also similar to the management plan on parking. There's a management plan for traffic. These things aren't real. These things are, pretty standard now in communities. You roll out, you can program them from laptops. We see when the lot fills on our laptop. We ship them to another lot on our laptop. Now, it may not be a town employee, it might be a contractor. Again, these are all, we're saying, managing what you have better. Yep.
I'm sorry, could you scroll down a little? I'm sorry for getting here late. I was in contract negotiations, but the first phase or phase one, what are the steps? The initial charge for on-street parking, retail district, is that your recommendation?
Yeah, this is right out of the parking study from last year. Metering, creating employee permit parking areas, striping parking that's not getting used, doubling down on the parking shuttle, and then looking for additional. It doesn't end. You got to continue to look out into the 10 minutes.
I may just address the enforcement part a little bit, and I feel it's important to say, help us help you. I don't think right now, 2-hour parking, it's tough for us to enforce, we not just manpower, but, actually going out and figuring out how long the car has been there. Metered parking would help solve that, right? People are going to police themselves, and those that don't, it will identify them much faster for us or for our people to go out and write tickets and do that enforcement, or if need be, remove a car if it has to get to that point. So I've said it, I'll continue to say it. I would have been happy if we implemented this 2 years ago. The metered parking.
Meters are self-enforcing. I appreciate that. That's it. So let's continue. I know we got a lot to cover, so I'm sorry I spent so much time on that. The next thing we probably want to take a look at is the actual cost revenue projections. Yes, please. So assumptions are coming from the study itself from a year ago. These would be a parking program that would implement seasonal paid parking the 2-hour time zone, and on a portion of Pearl and Gravel Street. Maybe kind of hard to get to the top of that. So this is a model, we can put other numbers in to generate costs and revenues, but essentially what we're looking at is a bunch of assumptions. First, that paid parking, we had talked about 9 to 6, 9 to 7. Committee felt in the last meeting 9 to 9. We really, we get going after 7. So I plugged in 9 to 9. That's not to say this can't change. It can come back. So this is 9 to 9, 7 days a week, including holidays from April 1st to December 31st at $2 an hour. $2 an hour is the standard rate all the way up the coast. Several communities are now moving to $3 an hour. Portsmouth, Bar Harbor considering. So the movement is up from that, but pretty much everyone else is up too. Okay, we got 2 in there. April 1st to December 31st. Why? January, February, and March typically end up being months that a lot of snow. The parking isn't as tight. We have some opportunity. A lot of communities still knowing that, still go year round. That's totally fine. Now they continue to meter and continue to, but you don't necessarily have to have one of those. Some of your costs are fixed and will continue through those 3 months with enforcement or administration potentially. You might have other things those folks can do. You still have to chuck the 2-hour zone, even if the meters aren't in effect. So, but for now, April 1 to December 31. Now, like Plymouth, they pull it back to November 30th because they don't want to get into the shopping season in December, where there's high parking demand, but that's what they want to do. So it's a community by community decision. We know when we came back here and did counts in November, the demand was extremely strong for November. So this is where we ended up. We're going to come back to this. So I don't want to jump in on everything, but meters will be bagged from January. Well, I said that. Soon, solar-powered credit card and coin-accepting parking kiosks would be installed in the time-restricted streets with mobile pay option. Okay, and then, at least for discussion, mobile pay only on Pearl and Gravel streets. Those 2 streets have sidewalks that are too narrow, footpaths that are under 5 feet in width. Can't put these pay stations on. So what we could do is a mobile text to pay, QR to pay, a sign to allow you to pay by phone, by credit card. If you had to pay by cash, we would have a kiosk right at the corner of Main Street where those streets are. You could walk in and pay with coin or credit card.
Excuse me, John. So these are physical meters that are going to be at the parking spaces.
They usually handle about 8 to 12 spaces.
All right. So if there's a kiosk, this is the whole thing. The chief said seeing these are self-enforcing. How does a police officer going by there, if there's no physical meter, going to know that person's been there more than 2 or 3 hours?
It's going to be paid by license plate.
Right.
So they're able to scan the license plate, get it, and see that they're paid or they haven't.
So the law enforcement will have the ability to do that, to scan the license plate.
And that's the standard now. And
I've seen somewhere you get the actual printout and they put it on the dashboard sometimes.
yeah, that would be called pay and display, and there's also pay by space where you could sign this to put the space on.
But I'm just assuming quickly, see, in the old ways, in my antique head, I see, a little red flag on the meter,
Single space meter.
which is quickly, someone, an officer walking or driving by can right away see boom, 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 boom. But you're saying that from a technology standpoint, it would be, the quickest way would be, the simplest way would be license plate.
License plate recognition, scanning. We do it with cars or on foot. In cars where you have traffic flow is not an issue, say Providence. You can drive down the street at 15 miles an hour and go bing, 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 bing. Just over time, not a resident, stolen car, call the police, that quick. Boom, 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 you're on to the next street.
So then what does it take for our police departments to have that technology?
That'd be incorporated into what the department.
Plan? Okay, great, got it. Thanks.
Okay, so that would be.
John Groton has questions. Hey, John, sorry.
That's okay. Quick question. Were we still considering the outsourcing of the actual enforcement itself to someone like a Laz who has the technology and exam and a lot of experience with it. And we had this conversation, the last meeting was, there was a debate going back and forth as to whether the police would do the enforcement or try to outsource it to a firm that could do it for us. Is that still an option, or are we looking strictly from the police force's standpoint? And this is not an affront to the police, because the conversation was, why use police officers to enforce when we can actually have the ability to outsource that capability and leave the police force doing what they do best, which is enforcement of every other law.
Yes, John.
Danielle.
This is Danielle. So we just had this conversation beforehand with just for the Stonington side, and we would very much be looking at a proposal for outsourcing it to a contractor. Not that Groton can obviously make their own decision, we can bifurcate the contract in a way, but we chatted with our police chief and the board of police commissioners chair, and they would very much like us to outsource this.
Thank you, Danielle. Sorry for being on my high horse. I guess my opinion is the enforcement with license optical technology is pretty straightforward. From my personal opinion, I just don't like seeing police forces spending their time doing that. If we can have another organization do it for us that has the experience to do it. But I'll get off my high horse. Sorry, guys and ladies.
A lot of communities do choose to outsource that function. Very fun. Very, very, very fun. Okay. So moving on. These assumptions: no discounted permit parking allowed on metered spaces, and that's fine to allow that. But then we would modify these. Assumes appropriate levels of meter and time zone enforcement, and that's one person, all the hours of meter enforcement for both communities. Another reason you might want to outsource, because you go to a single entity. Now there's consistencies of ordinance. We have to talk about some of that, but those aren't big hurdles. Okay. So, what we're looking at again, and this can be modified, and we want to get a recommendation toward the end of this meeting, but we're looking at, you're seeing the metered hours that are involved for 9 to 9 for those months. And there's the revenue projections. The revenue projections are based on some of the implementations we've done in other communities that are similar, Plymouth, Mass being one of them, and the capture rate. So you'll see projected meter revenue per hour $1.10. That's 50. That means that on average, 55% of that $2 of that meter is being captured with a parker. Someone's paying 55%. There's a lot of times spaces are empty. 9, 10 in the morning, and then seasonally those change. But these are kind of rates that we look at in other communities, which are capture rate. So I'm assuming now these are particularly conservative. I don't like to give projections. So then, in terms of breakdown of meter coin, if you're accepting meter coin.
John, you don't like to give projections that are high.
Sorry, I don't like to go over. Yes, that's right.
So
that's right.
Your numbers are very conservative on the low end.
Very conservative on the low end. Thank you. But back to the projected estimated meter coin. This is a breakdown of what we see. Bar Harbor, where we did the implementation 2.5 years ago, where they have 95% credit card use. Cash and coin is almost 0. Plymouth, I think, is around 80% now. Portsmouth is similar, 80% rate. So, but starting out, it sometimes starts a little bit slower. And so what I project 25% of total meter revenue would be coin. You do have the option of not accepting coin. A lot of communities will blank out at $2 an hour, 50 cents still buys you 15 minutes. That's reasonable. As that rate goes up, it starts to make less and less sense to have coin. So some will start by blanking out that coin chute, and then if there really is an outcry that, hey, we really want to be able to, they'll drop that and open it back up. So that's another community decision that varies from place to place. The mobile payout, we're seeing 15% in the first year. That rate of use is going up very quickly. As the more we're now seeing QR code and text and lots, you're seeing it here in Mystic, where that's the only way you can pay. So people are getting more and more used to that. And what we're talking about for our mobile pay is not having to have a register for an app. The biggest roadblock to using a mobile app is having to put an app on your phone. Is to go in there and fill out all that. It does take less than 2 minutes, but that is a major roadblock when we do our survey. People don't want to do it. So if you can go in as a guest and simply put in your credit card and your license plate, and you can save it, boom, you're good. Like the guest option. So that's starting to grow fast. 15% is probably conservative, but way. And then projected annual expired meter and overtime citation revenue, you would have a new fine, of course, expired meter fine. You have your overtime rate, 25%. Typically you see this at 50% of meter revenue at these rates, but if you're just starting out, there'd probably be a period of time where you wouldn't be ticketing anyone, I would think. During the introductory periods, we expect this to be a little bit lower. That's just fine. That's not delinquent. Delinquent. Sorry, that's a question. Okay. Then we look at annual permit revenue, and for the assumptions, this is, we're looking at for discussion. Free parking at the Union Baptist Church for these projections and at North Voting Hall lot to entice employees to go there. That could be for a certain time, and then you introduce a nominal rate. In other communities, that kind of walk might be $100 a year for a permit, $10 a month, however you want to, $8 a month, whatever it is. Certainly for the St. Mark's lot, we were working on a shared lot agreement. At the art museum lot, I think it's $548 a year. I don't know if that's still the case, Susan, but that was like $45 a month for a permit. So we'd be looking more at like $30 a month for a permit in that lot. That's a prime lot. Certainly if you open it up to just visitors, it would generate a tremendous amount of revenue, but it's not what the church wants. We want to control that population of employees. So these are just assumptions. Again, you set the council set the policy and the rates. I had to have something in there. Capital installation costs, based on 12 kiosks in Groton, 10 kiosks in Stonington for the areas I talked about. That's also conservative. That's probably more kiosks than you need, and we'll get into that when we actually get the vendor in and we walk the streets with the public works directors, which I've already done, but we do that with the vendor. So to be conservative, we're showing that, those are usually $7,500 a kiosk, and they come with freight installation. There's a couple locations would have to pour concrete pads that they couldn't just go right into the sidewalk because they would obstruct traffic. A couple of those, not many. We found sidewalk locations that were acceptable.
And John, that's generally a one-time fee that we'd be looking at. This is not an annual cost.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, for those kiosks and signage. You're going to need signage to say pay here at the kiosk. You're going to need your regular regulatory signage on what the time limit is, what the pricing is, and then you have mobile pay lots. And you get worried, the mobile pay signs, you get worried about having a lot of sign pollution. There are some signs that come down related to parking. I think overall, I think we try to consolidate and ensure that, and you don't need them every 50 feet, so I think, see if we could show you some other communities where that's done. If there's any concerns. I've got signage costs, enforcement. The enforcement costs are related to the printers that the mills would have. We would actually provide your operator that equipment to be owned by the town. Okay, and that's a total 225 total capital install costs. Yeah, back to John's point, one and done. You will have replacement costs for certain things, but these kiosks are good for 7 to 10 years. They should be retired here at some point. Annual parking hardware, software management fees. These go to the parking management vendors who would provide the kiosks and the enforcement mechanism. Those handheld devices. The assumption here is we'd use EDAs of the whoever manages this for us, and there would be a module associated with that. There's a management fee for the actual software program that's reflected.
this cost does not include the enforcement cost. This is the cost.
None of these include labor at all right now. So enforcement is not, but these management fees are not a one-year cost. These are annual fees, okay? Unlike the capital.
That 43,550, that estimate, is the annual estimate to maintain the software and equipment.
That's right. And total projected capital install management is there, so 268. So you can see that the projected, again, revenue, net revenue from the capital and the management fees, it would be around 431,000 total. And that's where you get in, and this is in year one only. That would be where you would then look at, okay, now we're going to go out, look at the labor. So if you don't want your CSOs doing the enforcement, that pricing for enforcement, we did bounce this off of last parking and just to get a range. It's a non-competitive range, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $120,000 for that enforcement function to cover all of the hours that we had, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. through all of those 9 months. Now, you don't necessarily have to have someone enforcing every minute of every hour. You can do, a lot of communities do like random changing schedules so that the parker doesn't know, oh, he's always out here on Tuesday between 4 and 6. You change that up because particularly while we do want someone there from like that busy lunch, 11 a.m. all the way up to 9 in the very early mornings, sometimes you can go without and, maybe show up twice a week. So that, again, that might be a little conservative on that price, but that would be on the enforcement end.
Sorry, Tom, on that, just given what Laz had said and what you had said, I mean, do you have a vague estimate of what we might on the more conservative, if we were looking to not spend 120,000 on enforcement?
I think it would be huge difference, to be honest. I think the two caveats on that range is one, it's non-competitive. One of the things we would hope to enjoy from Laz is the fact that they're already here. They have people that are probably not 100% utilized, so the added cost to them. And I've did these in other communities, and that's where you save all the money. So they should have that competitive advantage. Others are going to come in, but hopefully those prices go down a little on that, and maybe a little more on what I said on the time state.
You think it still could be around 100,000 a year for the enforcement?
And that's for both communities total.
Both communities total, I think they were telling me that they'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 an hour because it's very, very difficult to find, as you all probably know, to find that level of employee. And I know they have trouble with the CSOs too, right? Getting that.
Yeah, I recently hired another 2 of them started.
Also, there might be some added cost municipality to manage the program. So to date, we come together to help with the planning, but just like any contract, let's say it's public works, you don't just rely on the contractor to self-manage themselves. It has to be some entity that's going to supervise the program.
Correct. And that is, really, that's something we would spec and put into a bid document for your management consultant if the two towns agree that's the way they wanted to go. As a single community, sometimes someone will be in the police department, an IT person. That's what we did in Bar Harbor. They became a parking expert in a few years. They run the whole program super. Here with 2 communities, small program, not enough for one really. You would want a parking management person from this firm. I think reporting to both communities. I think what they would be doing is managing the maintenance of the meter, the collection of the meters, programming, the constant changing of it, the signage, potentially handling all the enforcement complaints, any kind of appeals that can go, hopefully you can have that still go through PD or you can sign that. So there's a whole host of things. You're still going to want that management person, probably an assistant. But that's something we would look at when if you got a full-time person and an assistant in there, you're gonna, look at, probably that cost again on the enforcement, maybe a little bit more than it, because you're gonna, well, you don't have to cover every single hour of every day. You're gonna probably have people on call. That could be a little bit, could even be a little bit higher. enforcement. So the long and short of it is, I think in year one, I still believe, even with the management contract, that you're gonna recoup the cost of the capital in year one. And in year two, that will go away. So that's a significant cost that in year two, then in year three, that all starts to roll back into the program.
Don't have any maintenance costs in here or replacement of equipment costs.
That is in there is no replacement of equipment cost. These kiosks
Well,
should,
it only lasts 7 to 10 years, you say.
7 to 10 years, we don't believe there'll be any more equipment on the street. We believe that it will all be,
It will all disappear.
Yeah. pretty sure. Some people think in 5, but most, 5 to 10 now will, all the vehicles are starting to develop in payment in the cars. We still have a few people without credit cards and a few people without smartphones, but that's moving away really quickly. So I hopefully you retire these and you don't put them back.
Let us know when you find that guy.
Yeah.
One suggestion I would propose is that, in the first year for the management costs, it could be that the amount of, we used to say man hours, what do you say, person hours, staff hours now, might go down in subsequent years, because what we have found in the downtown lot is that once people learn how to use the equipment, the amount of attention they need goes down. But at the beginning, that level of attention is really important to maintain a positive attitude on the part of parkers toward new systems. Change comes with difficulty here. And when a parker becomes frustrated or concerned about holding people up, then the thinking process kind of just stops. And if there is a voice or a presence, because vocal commands from equipment, kiosks and whatnot can also be a service. But just having reference to a person or a source of help is tremendously important in accomplishing that transition. So that's one thought I might have as you shape your budget projections.
Thank you. That's a really good point. I think both the vendors who you're going to purchase this equipment from and the operator, whether it's Laz or Public or VIP or any of the operators that are out there in Connecticut, they all have roll-up programs for new paid parking that would include healthy dose of ambassadors on the street. That's where the CSOs actually could come into play, helping people for a period of time. Great point. Yeah.
The dismal fact at our lot downtown is that we went to an unmanned system, and we are paying more in personnel now than we did with a staff system. There's been a lot of problems with the flash equipment that we don't understand, but that's not the parker's problem.
Yeah.
Parkers need to be able to get out of there. Now that's different because you're talking about a gate arm.
Have you had damage to equipment too?
I'm sorry?
Damage to equipment, broken gate arms?
Yeah, when people get drunk enough, frankly, or angry enough, they'll just drive right through the gate.
Happens a lot.
Yes. We do have a camera, so we keep an eye on it. One fellow respectfully picked up the gate he knocked over, carried it over to the garden and kind of laid it to rest with its hands on its chest. But a lot of people just simply bash out. And I think the amount of eating and drinking late at night
talked
has
about
a
this afterwards.
huge, yeah. Another thought though is that the whole train the parker thought is mediated in the summer by the fact that these are visitors. So long-term learning isn't the issue for them. They just want the service and they'll go out. On the other hand, they don't mind paying. They can't get their wallets out fast enough. They're so happy to have a place to park.
I'm really open. The proximity to New York is you're gonna have a very educated parker. We do see the differences as we go north,
Oh, yes,
and
I'm sure.
yes, particularly with mobile pay, they just that's what they do. So you get a lot of that, and everybody who pays either mobile pay, you know, and now you retain more. Is costs associated with equipment. So,
There's only so much change you can introduce at any one time. But again, with enough interpretation up front, people, I think, are much more accepting.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the other sides of the operator is they've got built-in web systems, so we'd expect this operator to have a website for both communities, parking and transit, mobility in general. The shuttle would be on, you know, they would maintain that, you know, and it would have your regulations and, you know, how do I pay online? How do I pay my ticket? You know, all that would be online, not be automated. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the projections. You know, again, labor is always a discussion about how you want to do that. Credit card transactions were not in there. The credit card transactions usually another 5% or less of the total your total revenue. It's usually between 3 and 5% of total revenue. They're small purchases. So yeah, there's some incidentals and that kind of thing. But I think it's good. The next thing I thought for the real discussion point is, you know, some of these parameters that I've recommended in the study, but you know, that's not, we really want to hear from you about confirming or modifying those to make them work. And I want to go through each one of them again. We talked about coin, no coin. That's a decision we should probably talk about, coin, no coin. And maybe we start with coin, no coin, because you will hear there's still a percentage of people who really feel good about dropping a couple of quarters in there.
So John, on the coin, no coin part, you know, I feel compelled to sort of reach out and say the words, you know, that a barrier to the access of using these spots, if you don't have a smartphone or don't have a credit card, that, you know, the spots shouldn't just be for those who have the technology, and that as much as I know it's going to be more expensive to allow the meters to have coins, and that you're going to have someone bonded to collect that money, and that you're going to have someone on the computer system who's notified when the meter is full of change, that I still sort of feel compelled to say that there are people out there that, you know, I know that a lot of us have smartphones and a lot of us have debit cards or credit cards these days, but, you know, there are still people out there, you know, and maybe it's 5% or 7%, but we shouldn't make our parking, you know, available only to those people. So I feel like it's sort of, you know, an equity ideal to be able to make sure that everyone can park in those spots.
Anybody else on coin, no coin?
That was a big discussion at our museum when we discussed this, as Todd will know. And because it was just one lot, we went without access by cash. I had felt strongly, as Susan does, that really limits your equity and your access and all of that. On the other hand, as Todd pointed out to me, the efficiency of the system is such that we want to be able to get people out of our lot. Again, a very different outlook than meters. You're not waiting in line to leave your parking space. But if it were town-wide, I would definitely have a problem with limiting that access. I agree with Susan.
Exactly, private versus public streets, right?
I think on the Stonington side, we really want the coin access.
No one objects to coin in.
I just wonder on the kiosk, if there's any advertising opportunities, maybe for the Mystic Chamber, or there's any space that we can promote or create a directory. And also, I don't know, this is probably dependent on the vendor, but when you're doing the paying, if we are having the digital, maybe there's also a digital tie-in with what's happening in Mystic at the time, QR codes and those kind of things. I think maybe an additional source of revenue, but it's definitely great for the merchants to promote economic.
Yeah, you're gonna get more data than you can ever, you probably see it on your end, more data than anyone can actually evaluate. But those can be put into usable either on the parking website or on the chamber web, definitely. Great information where people are parking.
I think Gregory said, so do kiosks usually allow for municipalities to put up advertisements or QR codes that they could scan for more information about the community, or do they kind of, okay, so we could do that?
There's multiple things you can do. You can do validations. They're typically after the fact, so you know, if a retailer set up with a laptop, they can, and they're given allowance to the system. They can back charge the credit card to, you know, give them a validation. I don't know if you're doing that part.
We offer validations, but not electronically after the fact. If we need to, we'll just eliminate the cost for someone who's having trouble getting out. As far as the kiosk advertisement goes, we're in an opposite position than what you propose, which is a grand idea. We want to divorce our image, our brand, from being a parking manager to being an art museum. Thank you very much. And when people get, as they will get annoyed at a problem they're having with parking, I don't want them to think of my museum. But if I had a QR code on there that could answer their basic questions about parking and where else they could go and all of that, I would put a wrap around the kiosk that says that. And again, a merchant is not as likely to be associated with parking problems as a big institution that is in the lot itself. So I don't think the hazard would be as great for the downtown merchants as it is for us.
Yeah, I think the QR code is a great idea, and also the print screens are so nice now, multicolored. And, you can put all kinds of snow information, you know, if the snow alerts, and you know, they can produce pretty much anything public service that you want when you get into advertising. But yeah, you can pretty much do it.
Susan, did you still have a question? I see Todd has his hand up. Susan, did you still have a question? Your hand was
Yeah, I
up.
just wanted to ask John a question about when you talk about cash and coin. Are there systems that will take bills but not coins?
Yeah, bills you can take at the kiosk as well. Bill acceptors, they have to be pretty much like you'd have at an ATM. They're fabulously expensive. And as soon as the bill gets wet, they're a mess. So we don't see many bills anymore, just because credit card is getting up to those 90% level. And because other bills have been problematic, they constantly out there with jail.
Right, and we had that discussion at the museum. So when you talk about cash, basically you're talking about coins.
Yeah, you're talking about allowing
As the medium for making a payment.
Yeah, and it typically, you know, when it gets to $2 and up, it typically works out to people wanting to jump in and out of someplace quickly for 15, 20, 30 minutes. You don't see a lot of, you know, full payment with coin. When you do offer it, you don't see a lot of it.
Okay, thank you.
I know everything's trying to get away from coin. That's the trend. I think way back when bridges would take tokens, and I just wonder, have you seen any model where a downtown would use token or some device for someone who did not want to use a credit card? Probably not. I'm just trying to think, if we're gonna allow either a coin or some physical item to pay other than a credit card, you would probably want to include the merchants in some way.
A shop local effort. Maybe.
Something like
Yeah.
that. At the very least, merchants could provide change. But I was also thinking of a mystic token.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
If we are going to allow a coin, let's allow someone to buy a token, and it would be a little bit more convenient, get a little bit of marketing out of it, branding, etc.
And it is done, and these kiosks will take tokens. So that's something where you can, you know, that's one way to do it. You can make it, you can purchase them at City Hall, or, you know, a variety of locations, maybe the vendor's location.
Mystic Chambers downtown.
Mystic Chamber, you know, and it might be multiple locations, or you tie it to said loyalty program for retailers. But it is done routinely. The other thing is something called in-car meters we've used in Portsmouth. which allowed you to charge up, kind of like a debit card, so much dollars in meter box, and you'd hang it from your rear view mirror, so enforcement could see it and we draw down time. Those are also very popular and it can be done in conjunction. So there are ways to do it.
The tokens, do you ever give like a recent discounts? Let's say if you went in and bought those, you get a little savings to get you in the store.
There's usually a promotional discount. Yep. Get buying them. That's a great idea. Break that.
Just, one of my biggest worries is just residential. Chief Pissarro and I are the traffic authority of Groton. We get so many complaints, from the neighborhoods, requests, we get petitions for, we want one way this street, we want only this side parking. There's probably gonna be, I think there's gonna be probably some places we have to do, because you can't get two-way traffic. We're probably gonna have to get rid of some spots sometime. So I'd like to get, at some point, your thoughts, if you've seen, suggestions where you've seen that, or any observations. Keep in mind that we might lose some spots.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of we were with the church yesterday, Union Baptist Church yesterday, and, talking about Library Street, where it's not, isn't wide enough to have parking on one side, which is allowed, and cars to pass, and, maybe if there is small cars, but, that I was mentioning, it's very, very common in historic downtowns to have that situation on many streets. Newport, of course, you can just name them. They're everywhere. They don't remove the parking. The parking can be a traffic calming effort. The key is that it's a low volume street. We always use 1,200 cars. Typically get above that level a day, and it starts to break down. People start to back up. But one is it has to be low volume. Two, there needs to be gaps in that stretch so that people can get in, so someone can go by. And usually those are driveways. And if they're not there, or they're long, particularly long stretches, in fact, I was working in Stonington Borough, same thing happened. If they have long stretches, you start to back up. So again, they have to create artificial pullover spots. That's fine. Just create a no parking zone. Let somebody pull over and go by. Don't eliminate the parking. I think that's a mistake in most cases. As far as the one ways goes, if we have one-way pairs on gravel and pro and all these, it would be great, but it does have major changes to the circulation system. Residents will, it's difficult to do. It's very difficult. That answer that? So, all right, so just go down here. Again, parking study recommended $2. You've seen $5.50 an hour down in a lot downtown, and it's full on the weekend. So obviously the rate can go higher, but that $2 rate has been around for some time in on-street parking post. I was going to, but I'd open it up that should be higher to start, or we wanted to.
I think market-based, it could be higher. Politically, I think starting low, thinking, because people still think parking's free. Not free, we've been subsidizing it. So getting our foot in the door with a low range cost, I think might be the first step.
Concur with that.
Anybody else on me?
It's probably worth mentioning to the final approval bodies that we did consider higher rates, but here's what we just let's bring it down to $1.
Maybe as part of that consideration, if you can share, like you said, the other towns up and down the East Coast, if they're all at $2 and there's similar kind of towns, that's a.
I'll do that. I mean, it's Bar Harbor, Camden, Rockland. I can go all the way to Booth Bay. I can go all the way down from Maine, all the way down to Cook. And I'll give the highest rates, which is over $3 now. They're way up on that, but yeah, I'll give them the whole list. There's very few under $2. Report as well. So anyway, and we've got retail district time limit. recommended 3 hours, and that's particularly because you didn't have a whole lot of off-street parking options. Typically, the two came from, oh, if you want to stay longer, go to the lots. Well, the lots aren't always available. And most communities are moving to, I shouldn't say most, but many are moving to 3. And some are actually eliminating the requirement altogether and going with progressive pricing. It's more expensive along the way. So I'd recommend 3 and throw that out for you guys. If 2 seems to be working and you'd like to stick with 2 or.
It's 2 hours now, right? I
2
mean,
hours.
so.
3 hours. And the other thing about 3 hours is it allows a one-stop shop. We don't want them to move their car again. If they're a customer, if they're an employee, they shouldn't be there to begin with. Hopefully that goes away. If they're a customer and they want to have dinner and they want to do a little more shopping, we don't want them to have to move necessarily to do it, and they can't necessarily move up. So that's kind of the.
They can come back and put more money in the meter, right?
Actually, that's a good question. Would there ever, I know some communities will cap out how much you can. So what is our thought? Because I think it has bearing on this. I mean, are we in theory allowing someone to stay on the street all day if they're willing to pay?
And that's the progressive pricing that I talked about. There's only one community, Portsmouth, who's currently doing it. They get more, $3 an hour goes up to $5 an hour. And so that alone keeps the people who really want to stay longer than 3 hours. It's a very small number there. What we're talking about is 3 to 3 hours. You would get an expired meter. You would get a overtime ticket if you stayed over 3 hours. Some people will pay for 2, and then remotely they can add that third. If they ended up staying longer than 2, they can add that 3rd hour on from the restaurant. They don't have to go back to the meter. They just
So yeah, but to confirm, this would be like after your 3 hours, if that's what we said, that to go back. Say, no, you can't. They have to move their car. That's why I think 3 hours is better than the 2, because we want to reduce the traffic congestion. That's part of the point. We don't want to force people to drive more.
I agree. 3 hours sounds about right. Even around my corner in front of my, again, it's anecdotal, but those spaces in front of my house often are changing 3 times a day. It's usually about that. That's enough time for them to go downtown, do what they want to do, go eat something and come back. But it's amazing how I can see those cars just turning right over. That's probably about right. 2 hours is probably too short. You know, if you're going to charge them right now, nobody charges them anything. So
yeah, 3 hours it is then. 15-minute spaces, do you charge or do you not? I put yes, that wasn't based on really anything, but some folks would want those 15-minute spaces to, be quick, jump in and jump out. Yeah, the act of actually paying for that 15 minutes kind of takes the convenience of that space away, is the argument against charging.
Tell them to go in the lot because we give them first 30 minutes are free. So paying at the meter makes sense. If they really feel like they don't want to pay and it's downtown, they can spin around the lot, do their thing and leave within 30 minutes. They don't have to pay. So I think you should pay for those 15-minute times. It's going to be hard to get people to move once they occupy that space after 15 minutes.
How many of these spaces are we talking about?
yeah, exactly.
Good point. The abuse does go up.
I'm sorry?
The abuse does go up rapidly once you start charging and leaving those free. There aren't many. I mean, there's a couple, I think there's a couple on Control Street, is there not?
Stonington in front of the post office and next to the post office on Willow Street and on Main. Those are the only 15-minute spots I
And then Groton, Chelsea Bank, there, on water, there's.
What prevents you from paying for 15 minutes in a 2-hour spot? Why not keep it the same? Why even have them at all?
Well, and some say, go ahead and do that. The only is like, my example would be when I was parking director in Portsmouth. Starbucks came downtown for the chagrin of the downtown. They argued for 15-minute spaces around building. And it created the turnover. They needed to be successful. They showed receipts before and after. So it was 2 hours and people stayed 2 hours.
Bookshop on
It's
your
always
right
taken.
side. Like I use that all the time. Like that 15-minute spot to run into Bank Square, grab a book, run out. And so I do think those 15-minute spots can help.
But is someone actually going to go through the process of paying for 15 minutes? Are they gonna say, ah, you're not gonna catch me in 15 minutes anyway, why am I gonna bother paying? Let's just.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the most likely.
that's the most
Yeah.
likely, and the use is very high when it's not charged.
You can always create those later, can't you? If you find there's a need.
You have them now, it's just what you wanna do with them.
I just see the post office is the only place that we, at least on our side of the bridge, that you need those 15 minutes. I was just in there this
The
morning,
post office.
You
is
zip in,
fair
zip
enough
out,
as a public
and there's only
service.
6 of them, I believe.
And that might be weird to charge.
We weren't charging that far down anyway, so maybe we leave those as is, but I don't know what the ones on Water Street, what you wanna do. That's in the meter
There's
district.
just that one in front of the bank that I
Something
can.
on the other side.
Can't get anything done at that bank in 15 minutes.
We enforce it, typically you enforce it 30, so you get a ticket after 31 minutes. Nobody can be there 15 minutes.
Why do you have parking in front of the bank, right? The bank has their own parking.
Yeah.
Good point, yeah.
We make it a 2 hour, I mean, it's.
I get the post office, the rest of it, I guess I'm just unsympathetic when it comes to that.
That's an open, you know, open question. Right now I have yes. So it's in the numbers anyway.
So for now, we'll charge it, and maybe a further piece is, do we eliminate the 15 minutes?
That way now we probably that would go to a committee and the council. So, yeah.
So maybe we put that out there as a question to the council, that, you know, we considered it. I mean, is there a strong objection to eliminating the 15 minutes?
One observation is that when you make all these changes and they go in, you're gonna have an easier time. How can I say, if you shift from yes to leave free, that's gonna be an easier change later down the line than going the other direction. You know what I mean?
Easier to relax later.
Then to up the ante.
I think about the intent of 15-minute space. The intent is quick run in, quick run out. So back to Sue's point, you could jump in a regular space and literally, if you had to step in a store, grab something and get out, that'd be done in a minute or two. I'm not sure why someone would need 15 minutes.
Maybe going to Young Buns or say buying donuts or Sif, that would be the only thing I could think, but
You're
the
not gonna
same.
get in and out of it.
No, it's-
That's so true.
Young bucks.
But yeah, I mean, City of Worcester, I changed all their 15s to 20 or 30, because we did the same thing. You can't do anything in 15 minutes. Even post office, usually you can, but many people can't. It's, you get in a line, something happens. Seems like 15. So. All right, I'll keep moving.
Yeah, I'm sorry, one other comment, it's Todd Brady. I mean, in West Hartford Center, you park, you pay. I think 15 minutes free or 30 minutes free. I think if you're gonna park, you're gonna pay. And it just is a lot simpler and everyone understands it, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, we'll leave it as is. That's the council. Hourly paid parking period, again, we started with 9 to 6 in the, when we did the pandemic counts, it kind of started to fade. The committee told me that's changed and we went back and looked at it. Yes, you're absolutely right. And so I think your question was 7, 8, or 9. I've got 9 in the numbers. The downside of 9 sometimes has to do with getting dark off season. A little difficult for enforcement. If you're not enforcing, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. Screens are illuminated, so it's very easy. But the other side of it is sometimes restaurants come out in opposition to the later hours, but that's pretty much all I have to offer you on recommendation on time.
I think the 6 PM is too early.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Gotta get at least past that first dinner hour.
Yeah, Sunday, I think is a reasonable amount based on what we see, but
Agreed.
that 9 to 6 during the week, I think that needs to be extended.
But 8,
Was it 7 or 8 or 9? 8?
Yeah, at least 8 o'clock.
I'd be more inclined to go 8 or 9. Given some of the recent things that we've dealt with, I'm in favor of 9, but it's.
There you go. I'm okay with that. Oh, yeah.
Well, we could always
Chief
do
is right.
9 if we had to back off later, we could.
Move back to 8.
That's right.
Easier to remember.
It is, actually, that is simple. Yep.
Well, I was gonna bring up the next question, which is Sundays.
Todd, did you have a question?
Yeah. What happens if you, so if you're in a space, say if you say it goes to 9, and if you park in a space at 8, will you stop getting charged at 9?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yep. This
Okay.
program asks you for an hour.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Sunday, as they say, some folks will do noon because of the churches. In fact, I think the primary impact here would be we don't really get down to the Catholic Church, so I think it would be primary impact would be tomorrow. So for some, they would start at noon just to stay away from that whole situation. But also, some still do the 9 to 9, and they just tell enforcement leave that.
Could that change seasonally too? Obviously during summer months, we may want to look at just having that 7 days a week, the same.
Well, it's like your point about keeping it simple, so everyone can simply understand the hours, the rate, everything is simple. 9 to 9 is very simple, and that is done routinely where they say, just for either seasonally or just to my enforcement, we're not writing tickets down there on Sunday between 9 and noon, and they just handle it that way. This one street. You know, if you have a lot of churches downtown, sometimes you see.
It gets very busy on in the summer on Sundays. It's not a big difference between Saturday and you're going to see the same amount of people during the day.
Yeah.
But you're just not going to see the same night crowd.
You definitely want to try to be as consistent, simple as possible. Move into those communities where they have parking signs up and it's high tide.
It's on the third Tuesday.
After the full moon, the first full moon.
The only rub on it I do see is that the meters out there is just, version is, well, there'll be an active meter, and even if you're not enforcing it, you have to pay to go to church. So that, and so you could handle the street differently. So some first stuff. Probably handling the street differently. Okay, and then the seasonal issue, April to December, 31. Plymouth is April 1 to November 30th. This word I can't remember. They're still
Probably.
You definitely have the demand to warrant paid parking through the period I'm showing, but it's policy decisions about.
We do have, I think April 1st, maybe a little bit late because we have the Mystic Irish Parade and things start getting a little bit busier during the month of March in Mystic, just because there's advertising from the businesses, they're getting ready for the parade, and it tends to bring people in even the weekends when that parade isn't going on.
Maybe
See it nod in your head, but, yeah.
December 31st.
2 months without it. In your opinion, then is it better just to be consistent year round? If you're only
We
giving it
get
2 months.
10 months, maybe we just do year-round parking. And that's
Keeping it simple is an asset.
I mean, it certainly would solve the issue of your enforcement people, are still going to be there, and your management people are still going to be there. So,
What about cutting? Is it possible to cut the rate those 2 months in half or something like
yeah,
that?
you can have
Program
different
that.
reasons, yeah, so you can.
I mean, it seems like it would be a sort of a bonus for the residents, that they could go
That's what I
down
look
there
like.
off season and at least they don't have to pay a park.
I look at it as residents driving downtown
Yeah.
and knowing at least those couple of months, it's $1 or whatever instead, or 2 free hours or anything like that. And that might help that might help the merchants, because I'm never gonna pay for parking downtown. A lot of people won't.
I was almost flipping it a little bit rather than saying when it's in effect. Almost, since it's almost a full year, I was thinking in terms of what months would it not be in effect, you know, almost saying January, February, March. Not in effect. That way, the residents know during that time period, either it's discounted or it's free.
You know, in terms of paying for enforcement, nice was to not have to carry that cost.
Also, I think businesses strangely might appreciate that too. They can promote it. I know some cities will say, Province, for example, will say during the holiday season, no charge for parking downtown.
Does it have to be by month? The reason that I ask is that, again, the lot, we try to make a nice impression on people by giving them the Thanksgiving weekend and then the week of Christmas shopping.
Yeah.
Just, we don't charge for parking.
That's really hot.
But we couldn't do that for the whole month, or we would rather not do that for the whole month. So what's tripping me up is the monthly part of monthly paid parking period. And it's a nice message for the towns, plural. I keep forgetting we're not a town. For the two towns to say, this is our gift to you for this, this, you know, to kick off the holiday season. Makes a nice message.
There are many towns that don't, even though they have year-round paid parking, they don't, they bag the meters for the last 2 weeks.
There you
of
go.
December.
Yeah.
They're very, very popular, very common, you know.
Yeah.
Now, is that something we would want to resolve now, or is that something you could almost have the council make a yearly declaration or something at some point in time?
That's right. You could.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's a policy matter. My only reason they're bringing it up is different ways that people handle this. Could you stay with paid parking on the main street or the commercial street where there's business? Absolutely. Plenty of people do that right through the season. The side streets like Gravel and Pearl, there are plenty of communities that will bag those pay stations in those off season because you don't really have that tight parking problem. So they take that onus off and will, you know, but they leave the main commercial street. So that's another one. So there's iterations, they're all policy, and maybe we don't have to try to figure exactly what that is at this level. Do we call it sort of year-round parking, paid parking with, you know, considerations to go forward on policy level, something like that?
I guess you go down the businesses and the residents, I mean, it'd be better to put it forward as likely we wouldn't. And again, for consistency, I like that idea, but I think it might be hard to keep track of this week or weekend. And I mean, should it just be like December, January, February, that those are the slower months, and December we could make money, but with the holiday shopping, maybe we shouldn't. I mean, that's the way I think Chief Pizarro was saying, he prefer March be an enforcement month. So I guess just throwing that out there, what do people think about, I think 2 months might be too short, it's kind of silly, so if we said December, January, February.
Now, the only problem with saying that for December, then would all of our parking, why are we doing this? It's not necessarily that we're trying to hit people with a hammer or a stick. We charge them money, it's to direct traffic and to manage traffic and parking in this area. And if we allow free parking in December, are we then going to recreate and have a free-for-all of problems again, that then all the emails and complaints are going to you and John?
Kind of like the off Main Street idea, Virgin Main Street.
Year round on Main Street, but side streets for those months.
Well, year-round on commercial streets, I think the vendors, the merchants on Main Street might be pretty mad if you're not charging them patrol or something. So I'm just really thinking of the two residential streets that are here for paid parking. Maybe they get, just because I think it's a different level from the store.
So maybe it's year round with some considerations to be determined later. Then town kind of figure that out, whether it's a week off at Christmas, January and February off or on, maybe that's something.
My only fear about it being as long, and I don't know, but as long as 2 or 3 months, is you're gonna have a riot on your hands when it goes back to parking. I mean, I don't mean to be demeaning, but I've seen how entitled people are about parking.
I would say, I mean, the seasonal programs we see are typically Memorial Day or May 1st at the end of October. That's 90% of the seasonals. I bring it up because we're very similar, believe it or not, supply and demand to Plymouth, who is April 1 to November 30th. But you're right about that. I'll be either doing a complete seasonal or year round, you know, we're saying year round. So that makes sense. But and the last one.
Yeah, I want one other question. I think that Mystic is a far less seasonal area, John, than maybe you are sort of focusing on. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I know if I go out to eat in February and a lot of restaurants downtown, they're very busy. So I don't think we're as seasonal as some of the other towns that you've worked in. And I think you have to keep that in mind. And I think, you know, having parking free and suddenly regenerating these traffic issues and then turning them back on again, I just don't think it's a great policy, but whatever.
To Paige's point, it's every time they make a modification, it confuses the, you know, the customer.
Yeah, it's amazing how a sunny Saturday in Mystic in January can be pretty busy.
This year round with the idea that we could grant to our respective boards.
Right.
And then just the rates now on the permit, $30 the same mark, I think. You know, and again, this is gonna probably come down here to the council. Does anyone object to the $30 just as a starter? And including
the employee permit parking program.
Correct.
Seems reasonable because you want to attract, want them to use it. No, I don't know, maybe an employer is gonna pay for it, split the cost with the employee, I'm not sure, but $30, quite reasonable.
Female parking right there. Okay, and then expired meter fine. I don't know if this was still, it was 25 in one and 20 in the other. I don't remember if that was 2 years ago. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, ours until a couple of years ago was $10. And it took as you may recall, it was a little bit of a lift to get it up, only because of the way it has.
Ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the going is 30 to 35, just because, you know, especially coastal, you don't want those people just saying, "Well, give me the ticket, I want to park."
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great rate, thank you.
That's exactly what we've run into. It's worth the extra money.
So is that something we want to recommend? That we raise the fee?
Sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And we'd probably want it consistent with Stonington. What is it now? Because I think when we did that, we did a survey of all the surrounding communities, and then after we did the survey, other places went up, so
You go to 20 or 25.
25.
Yeah, so we were at 25, I thought it wasn't it cheap, you were at 20 and we were at
We
25.
were at 10.
We're most recently at 10.
Oh, I think you're both at 25.
Now we're both at 25.
I think you're both.
Now we are.
Question, let's say somebody parks from 9 to 10 in the morning, they pay 1 hour, they stay the entire day, you discovered it 10:15, you ticket it. You're not, you
We could look at towing.
Well, what some communities do, because you're gonna introduce a new ticket that you don't have, expired meter ticket, is you could issue an expired meter and an overtime. And then communities that do it for that reason, one's not penalty enough, so they're gonna move forward.
Yeah, some do the tire lock, the boots, yeah. In fact, I think Groton City uses the boot in some places, yeah.
What's our ability to collect that fee if they're out of state?
Yeah, we'll require the vendor to have EMV connections to all of it. So they'll be able to do lookups.
Okay, so someone from Massachusetts comes down and they're in violation And now they're back in Massachusetts. How do you actually capture 25?
Well, it'd be late fees on top of the 25 budget.
We're like a poll, right? It would get mailed, it would get mailed to
But
their house.
it's a town ordinance.
Yeah, it's town, it's not gonna carry. But I mean, I think you can set your own policies for when you put a barnacle on the windshield or a boot on the car, they come back, but
If they come back,
Yeah.
that's how you get it. If they never come back, I don't think you.
So there's no interstate. Well, with an infraction, there's other, it does carry forward in other states, to some degree. There is reciprocity. With the town ordinance, there's.
Essentially carry a warrant for them if they come back, flag it in the system.
They never come back.
It'll be
Different, that's a state law. That's not a town ordinance.
Massachusetts, the whole charge, how do they enforce it?
The same way you could potentially, depending on what it is, you could potentially have your registration suspended. You could potentially have your registration for some violations in other states. There's reciprocity where you get your registration in Connecticut suspended based on a suspension in
That's how the
Massachusetts.
whole system.
We think because it's a local ordinance,
Yeah,
not a
this-
state law, we don't have the
Oh,
authority
you think
to
that's
take their
the
registration
difference?
away, but we can mail them tickets and
Sure.
kind of honors.
It must be the case with rental cars then too, yes? If someone rents a car, it's the car that's been flagged.
You'll get charged from that.
You'll be
rental.
charged, yes, it's happened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have experience with that.
So I think we have the same thing, but like we would need a new ordinance to create a fee for expired meters. It's not the same as a parking ticket.
You need new ordinance for expired meter. You need to make, well, if we're both 25, if we're gonna change, you're gonna change the citation. You're going for that. We'll also need one to go to 3 hours.
So if we do that, from this group's perspective, do we want 30, do we want 35? We want to origin number?
I think it's got to be somewhat punitive and discourage people from violating it. No.
35. And then we'd be creating a new ticket of expired meter.
You see it higher than 35 anywhere?
No, yes, oh, yes, definitely.
50, $60. I know the state parking fine on a state infraction is $60 right now.
In bigger cities, but 30 to 35 is there. And there is an issue when they get too high, your payment rate actually goes down. We'll say,
Sure.
that's enough money, maybe I won't pay this ticket. So there is a fine line there where it goes the other way.
I'm thinking of the phone calls and emails, to locals who are gonna receive these. They're not just tourists out of state. So we're trying to sell the program well. And I don't want it to receive backlash. Year one. So I definitely don't want it high. But I think 25 is a low end.
We should write an ordinance to the council. Change those by resolution.
So we recommend 35, and if they go to 30, then that would be nice. And the other point is beyond just not paying the tickets, your appeals go through the roof.
Sure.
As a number.
Okay, and those are handled by the two reviews abroad, right?
We actually, we have a hearing officer that hears those.
So if there's some really strange scenario that occurs and someone wants to do it.
They can, and they do now. I mean, we don't get a lot of appeals, but we aggregate them and then we appoint John appoints a hearing officer. We've used a couple of different people in the past, depending on that.
Great, thank you for that. That was great input. I think the last thing I just wanted you to show was just a couple of things we've been working on, the shared lot agreements. First,
John, before you up, I just, and all my people ask this too, you talked about, I just want to make sure I have the right narrative to go back to, because the number one question I think we're going to get about paid parking is, will this negatively impact or help the abutting residential street? So you have like a good kind of explanation for people about why this would help the residential street, not push it out there?
I think what this plan sort of saying is, let's start creating off-street public parking. You don't have, you're unlike all the other cities, you don't have it. And so let's start to create it through these agreements and start to get the employees to move it. Charging of the parking will move anybody who's an owner too. I'm sorry to say, retail owners can be the worst. Hopefully I'll end here. But they will take it as.
I'll confirm that.
Yeah, okay. And so starting to move, the rate will move it, the enforcement will move it, then to where? If it moves it to a residential street, did we gain anything there? If the residential street needs that parking, maybe not. I was on Pearl Street this morning at 8:45. It was all taken. Those are not residents. I mean, some maybe people storing a second car out there. They have giant driveways with some of them do 12 cars. But there are streets that don't have that. They have multifamily. Paul's mentioned, Willow Street's a good example, right? So I think the point is, Stan and Haley, you got some. So, I think that the point is that you've got opportunities that phase 2, which can be year 2, to say, to look at it and say, like Pearl Street, we have a shared lot agreement there with church. Move the employees there. Kind of hard to argue when you're just moving into the lot next door. And if you're a resident who really needs the space, maybe they get a permit on that street. I think most there probably don't need it. And see what the impacts are to some of these other streets as well. That's why I bring up Frontier, because I think it's such a great opportunity with the utility to use parking, even if you're doing nothing but giving it to the residents of the street to park in. But I would say, solve your employee parking, put the employees in there and free that street up for the streets. You can now put a time limit on it. You could charge in it potentially. So those are the things you got to look at. Again, the onus is on the operator to sell these permits and manage it appropriately for the town. Not going to be on your staff. But that's the flexibility that paid parking gives you to be able to start doing it. Managing that. Yeah. So I wanted to just show you a couple of quick things that we're working on. One was with the Union Baptist Church. And this is just an agreement that we've gone through legal in Groton on a shared lot agreement.
A draft agreement.
Draft hasn't gone to council, so it's something that, we'll look at. And that would be a sharing of that, some consideration, whether it's plowing the law, crack sealing, doing something. So this is a legal agreement. The other document I wanted to show, I guess it's with that. It's probably on page 2 of that.
No, it is a different document.
It is a different document that shows, and these are 2 agreements of St. Mark's and Baptist that may or may not go forward, but they both want to share their parking regardless. One of the things we always ask is for what consideration. And at St. Mark's, it's maybe we maintain the landscape. I've done many of these shared agreements, and it's always different. At Union Baptist, we looked at the lot itself and said, maybe we can reconfigure that lot to get more spaces out of it. And it's not particularly efficiently done in the back of that lot, if you think about it. So we gave them a plan that would shift that to angle parking and create 15 net new parking spaces, not just for the church, but for the downtown in general, and assuming that get used. And so there's some of these opportunities. I know the Art Center has, there were 2 redundant, as I recall, access ways that may have been changed a little bit that you could consolidate to get 30 to 35 new spaces. These are priceless spaces. So I think if there's ways for the town to partner, if we're going to see a public parking benefit out of it, like there's a cost of striping and maybe a little bit of landscaping, the Baptist Church, but out of it you get 50. It's worth it's worth doing. They just had head-in spaces on either side in a wide aisle. I think once in a while they'll just put a few, cars down the middle, but this would in concept would meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance for aisle widths and stall widths, and allow them to add parking at almost no cost. And that's the type of thing we got to do when we get with the privates, because what we know is they're not using their parking, the privates, not saying the church, and going empty. And so there's one issue. If they're like Groton Chelsea Bank and they want to come in and charge at night because they're not using it, why not? Why wouldn't we encourage public use of all those private lots? Because what the study showed is they're significantly underutilized. You don't have a public supply. So I just wanted to give those as examples and why we were kind of talking about Frontier and the Art Museum and what happened at Whalers. Until, some of these things can be beneficial.
One of the issues we're facing with the downtown lot at the museum is that it is on really soft ground. And there are areas that are beginning to be of serious concern. Fixing that is a capital outlay that is murderous. So if we were going to reconfigure the lot, I would want to incorporate some means of also strengthening the lot. So, some maintenance, because it will continue, it's built on a dump.
Yeah. You gotta bring the bill, you pay,
Yeah, and I don't have, the expertise to know what it takes, but I do have enough experience to know it's gonna cost a lot. So I would, we would be happy to participate, but we can't handle that expense on our own off the bat.
Well, that's why I say these are things to look as we go into phase 2 is like, start looking at all that parking, Frontier, all these opportunities. Maybe they won't shake out, but I think a couple of them will.
It's a remarkably poorly designed lot. There's a lot of lost space and weird kind of boxed in areas too. So, yeah, that could be very fruitful.
It might be that the 5-year plan is to fill in the potholes, kind of seal it, restripe it at small cost, and then start working on the design of something to really shore it up for a longer term too. So we don't really have to eat the whole apple in one bite.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've covered just about everything, but kind of some of our next steps in the near future, we obviously want to take this information off to the town council, but we're thinking of trying to have some type of a public input session. All of these meetings have been posted on the town's website. They're all on Zoom. And aside from all of you that participate, we really haven't gotten any public participation. I don't know if we're getting a lot of views on these meetings. I haven't checked to see how many YouTube watches each one has had. I have directed a number of people to the webpage, to the previous YouTube meetings. But we do want to try to do something. It would be great if we could somewhere in downtown Mystic one afternoon or one evening. We're actually meeting together in early November on resiliency and sustainability in downtown Mystic. I think on November 1st. Maybe that night we'll put up some posters about this project and at least direct people towards the website and think about maybe if we could hold something one afternoon or evening at Union Baptist or St. Lawrence or something like that. So any suggestions on what to do?
Did you push out links on and explore more? Did you send anything out that way to people?
This meeting, I don't think that we did.
And I can do it on the town's Facebook.
Yeah, but at least, for people to go back and watch it.
Yeah, so there's a link will be right to the next one, so it's a reason to put it out in the
Yes.
next, smaller than the next thing.
Also hope that we have, working backwards from say like a town meeting or however you guys pass an ordinance, but to say, we're gonna be considering the parking meters and then the changes to the times and that once we know there's an action and then we work our way backwards, if that might be in January or February, then maybe at end of November, early December that we're having this, because once they know there's an action that's gonna happen, that's when they'll come out, I think, to communicate more. I think until then, we won't get much participation.
And then there's outrage when it really happens.
It's funny, isn't it, how parking, when someone is parking, is the most important subject in their entire world. 5 minutes after they've parked, it's the least, it's not, it won't, never mind.
Not that it necessarily will cover what you're looking for, but myself and Chief Del Grosso have, and Chief Stewart before him have been doing this coffee with the chiefs in downtown Mystic. We have one coming up on Friday, September 30th at 9 o'clock. I'd certainly invite anyone here because we do get those questions. A lot of people that come in are, live in the downtown Mystic area or frequent visitors, and they have questions about this sort of stuff that we try to field. So I certainly welcome, it's I've got it on my calendar as being on Friday, September 30th from 9 to 11 at the Diddy Bag. So we kind of alternate sides of the river where we have, but maybe just a little bit of a barometer for those that show up that may have a strong interest one way or the other on this and other issues.
We work on like a timeline, working maybe backwards from, we want this installed by May 1st. 2 months for an RFP, whatever else they have to do. I mean, the timeline's actually probably pretty tight and we need that public input pretty soon. So it probably needs to be November. And then again, if we want to have a joint meeting, on our side, it's really more the Board of Selectmen for the ordinances, but then the Police Commission for the, and obviously our chair has been very active in this. So I mean, shouldn't be any surprises from that end, but if it helps you guys on your side to have a joint meeting, we're happy to arrange it. Or just ICOM or myself and Bob come, whatever.
Like something like that would be helpful at the council level for us. Before we know it, it's going to be budget time. We're going to be sending out a memo on the CIP soon, which something like this. We, on our side, we took our capital improvement program.
Public session and then council.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. Yes.
I think Daniel's right. You don't have to procure the equipment because you get the national procurement.
John, is that, you have to pay up front for this, or is it like if we were trying to install the stuff in May? I didn't even think about that. We haven't budgeted for this budget cycle, so I guess that's something we'd have to think about. I guess you'd have to pay up front.
Yeah.
Think of those cost breakdowns for the capital equipment. Is that all expected up front?
Is your fiscal year July or is it July?
It's one of the problems, if we look at implementing this at a certain time, it always seems to push it out another year because of the budget cycle.
I mean, and I think we can figure it out. It's good to know if there ever is, like, can you pay half up front and half post July 1, or do they expect it all up front?
Yeah, I think about that one on the capital side.
Can you share those Excel spreadsheets with those costs with us? That's something that can be shared with us, or no?
So once it's ready for the public meeting, probably. Got to refine them from this meeting.
Yeah, let's refine them from this meeting, and then we can kind of put draft on all of them and share them out there. So folks can see them. Again, just as their working documents and everything, an estimate or a draft.
No, and I understand the sensitivity and the caution to all of a sudden put these out for grand, gross public circulation, which I know we don't want to do yet. That's why I asked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, they're at a meeting, they're out there,
Yeah.
people want them.
Oh, that's right. This is online.
Yeah, so we
So
just,
I can go look at it. Okay.
yes, but we just want anybody that looks at it to realize at this point, these are drafts, these are moving forward as recommendations, nothing has been adopted. I mean, even after we had an RTM meeting last week and someone sent me, an RTM member sent me an email, what meeting was this decided and approved at? Like, no, nothing has been decided or approved yet. And it's still up to the council, the RTM, to budget these items.
The staff work.
That,
This is the staff work that goes into
right.
their deliberations and decisions.
Got it.
All right, thanks, everybody. Yeah, making some good progress.